Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're taking a close look at a bill that's moving through Congress right now.
That's right. It's H.R.965, officially called the Housing Unhoused Disabled Veterans Act.
Quite a name. So our mission today is really to break down what this bill actually does, who it's going to affect, and why it's significant.
Especially focusing on housing assistance for disabled veterans. That's the core issue here.
Exactly. And we're working directly from the text of the bill itself, H.R.965, from the 119th Congress.
Straight from the source.
Okay, so let's start right at the top. Section 1 gives us the short title we just mentioned, Housing Unhoused Disabled Veterans Act. Pretty self-explanatory goal there.
It seems so, yeah. And the main purpose, laid out right away, is to amend the United States Housing Act of 1937.
Ah, the big one, the foundation for a lot of federal housing programs.
Precisely. And this bill wants to change how that act works by excluding certain disability benefits when calculating income.
Okay.
But crucially, only for specific housing programs. That distinction is important.
Right, so it's not a blanket change. It's about which benefits count as income and where they count. Let's dig into Section 2 then. Exclusion of certain disability benefits. This zeroes in on a specific part of the 37 Act, Section 3B4.
Yeah, this is where the legislative mechanics get interesting. They're proposing to basically redesignate a couple of existing clauses, move them down the list, essentially.
Shuffling things around.
Exactly, to make space for two new clauses. And the first new one, Clause 4, that's a key piece. It applies specifically to the supported housing program under Section 8019.
Okay, Section 8, that's the voucher program generally, right? But what's 8019?
So Section 8 is broader, yeah, but subsection 19 deals with the specific type of voucher assistance that's often paired with supportive services. Think housing plus help for folks who might need it, like veterans dealing with disabilities or homelessness.
Gotcha. Supported housing. And what does this new clause actually do for people in that program?
This is the heart of it for this section. It says that if a veteran is receiving disability benefits under Chapter 11 or Chapter 15 of Title 38 United States Code.
Okay. Title 38 being veterans benefits.
Right. Chapter 11 is typically compensation for service-connected disabilities, and Chapter 15 deals with pensions, often for non-service-connected disabilities, but still based on need and service.
So those specific payments.
Those specific payments are not to be counted as income when determining eligibility for that specific supported housing program, the 8019.
Okay, that sounds pretty significant.
Yeah.
It means those disability checks wouldn't push a veteran over the income limit for getting into or staying in this supported housing.
Potentially, yes. It could definitely lower a major barrier. But, and this is a really critical but, right after saying these benefits are excluded, the bill adds, except that this exclusion may not apply to the definition of adjusted income.
Adjusted income. Okay, what's the implication there? That sounds like lawyer speak for it's complicated.
It kind of is. Adjusted income is usually what's used to calculate how much rent someone actually pays. It's like your gross income minus certain deductions. So while these disability benefits might not count for getting in the door,
They might still count when figuring out the rent payment itself.
that's the concern, yes. The bill says the exclusion may not apply there. It's not a definite yes or no, which frankly adds some ambiguity. It could mean their rent share is still based on an income figure that includes those benefits.
So eligibility gets easier, maybe, but affordability isn't necessarily guaranteed to improve by the same token. Interesting nuance.
Very important nuance.
Okay, then there's a second new clause they added, Clause V. What's that one about?
Clause V deals with a slightly different situation. It looks at households that are already getting help under that same supported housing program, Section 8019.
Meet people already in the system.
Right. And it says if those households are being considered for other types of housing assistance, maybe moving to a different program, then those same Title 38 disability benefits, Chapters 11 or 15, received by a veteran
Are also excluded.
they're also excluded from the income calculation for eligibility for that other assistance.
That seems logical. Like, it prevents a situation where getting help in one program makes you ineligible for another down the line because of how income is counted differently.
Exactly. It's trying to create some consistency as veterans navigate different assistance options.
Let
But
me guess. The same caveat about adjusted income.
you got it. Again, it says this exclusion for other housing types may not apply to the definition of adjusted income. So the same potential issue exists, helps with eligibility, maybe not as much with the final rent calculation.
So Section 2 is really targeted at this 809 supported housing and transitions out of it, focusing on eligibility based on income,
Yeah.
but leaving that question mark around adjusted income and actual rent burden.
That's a good way to put it. It's definitely trying to open doors, but how affordable the room is once you're inside. That's less clear from this section alone.
All right, let's shift to Section 3 then. This one's titled Treatment of Certain Disability Benefits. Sounds similar, but is it different?
It is. This section seems to be looking more towards the future. It sets up a rule for a very specific scenario.
Okay, what's the scenario?
It applies to veterans who will be renting housing units built on department property.
Department property. Like
Like
VA property.
The bill defines it by referencing Title 38, Section 901, which generally relates to VA facilities and land, yes. So housing built on that kind of property and built on or after this act passes.
Okay, so new construction on VA-related land.
And these units have to be receiving assistance through a housing program run by HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, that doesn't even exist yet.
Wow, okay, so this is really planning ahead. For future programs, future housing on department land, what's the rule?
Here, the language is stronger. It says the Secretary of HUD shall exclude from income any disability benefits the veteran receives under those same Title 38 chapters 11 or 15.
Shall exclude, may not apply to adjusted income.
Exactly. That caveat we saw in Section 2, it's gone here. For these specific future programs on department property, it mandates a full exclusion from income. No mention of adjusted income ambiguity.
That's a much clearer directive for those future situations. Makes you wonder why the difference in approach between current transitioning programs and these future ones.
It does. It could be easier to set clear rules for programs that don't exist yet, perhaps, but it's a notable difference. Section 3 also quickly defines secretary as the HUD secretary, which is standard.
And it mentions the definition for department property is found elsewhere in Title 38.
Right. It points us to the definition but doesn't spell it out within H.R.965 itself.
So Section 3, future-focused, specific to new housing on department land under new HUD programs, and a seemingly more complete income exclusion for those specific disability benefits.
That sums it up well. A proactive measure for certain anticipated housing developments.
Okay, so we've walked through the main changes. What about the bill itself? Where is it in the whole process?
Well, the information we have shows H.R. 965 passed the House of Representatives. That was on February 10th, 2025.
Okay, so it cleared one chamber pretty recently.
Very recent. And then the very next day, February 11th, it was received in the Senate. It was read twice, that's standard procedure, and then officially referred to a committee.
Which committee?
The Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs.
Makes sense. That's where you'd expect a bill like this to land in the Senate.
Absolutely. They handle housing legislation, so it's passed the House, now it's in the Senate committee stage.
Which means it still has hurdles to clear, right? Committee review, maybe amendments, a committee vote, then potentially the full Senate floor for debate and another vote.
Exactly. Passing the House was a big step, but it's definitely not law yet. It's now under consideration in the Senate committee.
Got it. So let's try to wrap this up. The Housing Unhoused Disabled Veterans Act, H.R. 965, aims to help disabled veterans access housing by changing how certain disability benefits, specifically Title 38, Chapter 11, and 15 benefits are counted as income.
That's the core idea. It mandates excluding these benefits for eligibility purposes in the Section 809 supported housing program.
And for eligibility when moving from that program to other assistance.
But with that potentially important caveat that the exclusion might not apply to calculating adjusted income, which affects rent.
Right. And then Section 3 looks ahead, mandating a seemingly clearer exclusion for veterans in future specific housing programs built on department property.
Correct. A more definitive exclusion for those specific yet to be created scenarios.
The potential upside here seems clear, making it easier on paper for disabled veterans facing housing insecurity to qualify for help, removing a barrier.
Definitely. If income calculations involving these specific benefits are preventing veterans from accessing support, this bill directly targets that issue.
But as you pointed out, that adjusted income language in Section 2 is, well, it's something to keep an eye on. It raises questions about the actual affordability impact, even if eligibility is improved.
It really does. It highlights how technical these definitions can be, and how eligibility and affordability aren't always the same thing in housing policy. You need to look at the whole picture.
So it's a step, but maybe not the whole journey. Which brings us to a final thought for you listening. We focus on income exclusion here based on this bill, but thinking about the challenges disabled veterans face finding stable housing. What else is involved beyond just income calculations? Are there barriers related to, say, navigating applications, discrimination, availability of suitable housing, access to healthcare alongside housing? And how might future policies need to tackle those wider issues? Something to think about.
Absolutely. It's rarely just one thing.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.